it's definitely on the safer side. I think if it's anything, it's Biden being able to. The real question is, can he get the African American turnout? And this is going to be key to him winning cities like winning, because in cities like Philadelphia, and in cities like Cleveland, it was a that's what hit. Like, it was like 2 votes per precinct. That's how much Hillary lost Michigan by last time. Just 2 more votes in each precinct to get on her way, she would have won. And that speaks to how much of the way Trump won last time is just depressing her turnout and really
she depressed her own turnout.
That is true. That is true.
She was the worst candidate in history. He's the second worst.
Yeah, it's almost kind of funny that, Hillary would. I was thinking about how Hillary is the only person who could have lost to Trump in 2016. And Trump is the only person who could have lost to Biden in 2020.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, that just the way he is. Like, if coronavirus had not happened, I believe we would be talking about Biden, just very as the underdog.
It would have been a shoe. Even with all the tweeting and all the things that all these supposed things that suburban housewives hate. They still like to have jobs and they still like a good economy. So I think your Twitter feed comes well down the list without coronavirus.
Yeah, and that's pretty much most of what Biden was running on. Like, when you don't have a job, you don't really care that much about the soul of the nation.
Exactly right.
But yeah. So we now go to another very controversial one, and this is what he can do. This is really as someone who wants to see a kind of more left-wing Democratic Party. This is really what worries me. A lot of the reason why Biden has been so competitive in states like Georgia and North Carolina and Ohio is because he's getting these kind of formerly right-wing suburban people to really just switch over to the Democratic Party just because of Trump, and that's not sustainable. That's not sustainable at all.
I agree with you.
There's going to be a Republican who isn't so uncouth, and they're going to be in real trouble. So that is you can enjoy it now, but I think it's very, very disturbing down the road.
Well, I think right now you take what you can get, right?
Yeah,
and then try to fix it later. But I don't know if you can fix that. It's the Democrat Party, more so than the Republican Party, really needs to be 2 different parties. There's, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said it herself. In a real world, I'm not in the same party as Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think there is one. It's not like they need to be. I don't think they need to be 2 parties to win, but there's just two groups of people, 2 groups of, again, entirely different people outside. So in this party, and they're really Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden. They're perfectly happy. This is what they've always wanted. Ever since 2016, that's what the plan was. They said so long to the union working class voters that made up all of our electoral success, and hello to the Philadelphia suburban women, and that's looks like it's what's finally going to happen here in 2020.
Yeah, well, they said hello to those women and to the far left, and that's what they're going to keep trying to cobble together. But I think there's a world of difference between a suburban housewife in Philadelphia and and the really radical left. They don't have the same interest.
Yeah, we do argue a lot about it. The left, as someone who is on it, does not feel embraced by the Democratic Party. I think the moment we've already seen it. We see Biden with the guy who was shot by the police in Philadelphia. I believe it was Walter White or something. I know his first name was Walter, but very, very sad, killed. And Biden just was like, what do you say to those who are grieving over the death of Walter White? And this is something that, while you probably going to say that you would agree with it, and so definitely a position catered to suburban people, and it's definitely not to the Black Lives Matter people. It was like the first thing he said was, "Well, don't do any looting, and no kind of acknowledgement of Black Lives Matter." And that is, I think, people on the left should be preparing themselves for a future that was like a lot like Obama, because Obama didn't really, he kept a very arm's length distance from all things Black Lives Matter in a way that the Democratic Party like you would not have seen Democratic Party people and the kind of cultural left, like the cultural liberals.
He kept his distance between BLM and himself, but not between racial issues. He did his fair share of stoking of racial issues. They all do. They're politicians.
But I think he just addressed them. I don't think he necessarily stoked. I think he was very, very careful to not step on any toes whatsoever on that, especially on that front.
He was clearly more apprehensive about forays, because it's a minefield. It's
especially at that time, like people hated talking about it. But now, like, I feel like we have gone through a massive cultural change that they initiated. They initiated in a big way, and they are not going to want to have when they take power.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I think one of the missing, what's missing in the conversation about this election is it gets lost in the racial overtones. The more I look at it, and the more I talk to people, and I have friends who have, they're black families of reasonable means, right? The more I talk to them, the more I realize this is not these are not racial issues. These are class issues. These are people wanting to send their kids to school in safety, paying lower taxes so that they can, have the best life they can for their kids. It is much less about race than it is about class, although race is always going to dominate it, because that's what I think. I think it's the media.
It's a lot more comfortable to talk about that. Yeah,
it's clickbait. It's class issues aren't clickbait. Now you're talking about policies, right? And I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think though, it's definitely. I do think though, like people like Nancy Pelosi and like the Democratic leadership are not going to like want to come out and say these are class issues. Like we are fighting a class war. Like that is not the.
That's never going to fly.
No, never.
You could probably say that in the Republican Party.
I think I think that it's interesting that people like Tucker are like trying to bring that in there, but yeah, and that's something I do want to get into is like how are we gonna like what does the Republican Party look like after Trump, which I think is really, really interesting. But all right, we're gonna take a brief moment to go through some of these states here just to give you an idea. We can do Georgia now. Get your prediction on Georgia. This one is going to be counting slowly. The early in-person votes usually come in first in the rural areas, so Trump will take the early lead there. Then we'll have to wait for the Atlanta area counties to report at all, and then some Democratic absentee votes. We may not know who won this one until the sun comes up. North Carolina will have a quick count. As with Florida, expect the early and nearly all mail-in ballots first and fast. So Biden's going to take an early lead, and then we'll see a Trump comeback. We'll see whether it's enough, but we could easily have enough votes for a call by midnight, even in a closer race. But the thing is, the state does accept absentee ballots well after the election, which is going to help Biden, but we may not need that many absentee ballots to determine the winner. So, that's going to be a little bit of an interesting one. So we'll talk about
this is the theme, right? If it came by mail, odds are it's a blue vote. And if it's in person, odds are it's a red vote.
Yeah.
And that's just that's why the counting and the qualifying of the ballots it's gonna be a tooth and nail battle if it comes to that. It
Yeah.
just will be.
And it's gonna be so important for people to I think people in all like politicians and in the media to like actually be honest with what's going on.
Oh, you're gonna ask the media to be honest about anything? Are you kidding me?
The media, I'm not nearly as worried about the media as I'm worried about Trump and this one.
Oh, you know what? I think that's overblown, frankly.
You think he will not try and declare victory?
I I think he's the world's biggest troll for good or ill. Um, he he just says a lot of things. If you look at what he says and then what he does about the things that he's talking about, there's certainly more talking. Uh, these oppositional posture, defiant statements. He just says a lot of things. It's what he does. It's what some people love about him. It's what a lot of people hate about him.
Yeah, I just like if I see a situation where it's very likely. I think it's like it's not hard to imagine a situation where you have people like going to like the Supreme Court. Maybe if it's close, it goes to the Supreme Court. Like challenges in multiple states.
Yeah.
Like if it's close enough, like do you think the Supreme Court could like push it over the edge?
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court is going to do its job. There's no reason. The bottom line is state election boards have wide latitude, right? But some of the state election boards are kind of pushing their own limits. You're going to see, if it comes down, I think the Supreme Court is only going to take up whatever they can legitimately get their arms around in a federal sense. That's it. Letter of the law stuff. No one's going to, the way the court seems to be working is, because Roberts has been leaning more and more left, I think it's still a fairly evenly divided court. But now you've got more textualists on the court as opposed to ideologues, right? At least that's my view. Some people will disagree with that, I'm sure. They're only going to take up what they can truly feel confident about ruling on. I think you'll see a lot of state election laws stand. And so pretty much whatever we're looking at as far as the rules with few isolated cases, they already deferred one ruling, right, by putting a Band-Aid on it. We're just holding late votes and then deciding whether we have to count them or not. Well, if it comes down to that, you'll see the Supreme Court still involved. But I don't know that they're going to get involved in every state. They'll just kick it back to the states, which is their job, right?
Yeah, and I think that would definitely be a more ideal situation. But even in that kind of referral that happened, I believe, in Pennsylvania this past Friday, there was an interesting note from Kavanaugh and some of the more conservative justices saying if there are mail-in votes that come after, which in Pennsylvania is very likely, that would end up flipping the vote, which is kind of ridiculous because like the flipping the result is what he said because there is no result. Then the Supreme Court kind of reserves the right to come back in.
Exactly.
Do you think that is like that? That is where I think most people are, including me, are most nervous.
I think they clearly don't want to be involved in state laws. Once you define precedent by ruling on something that comes out of a state, you've set that rule for everybody.